Hello. We're going to talk about Hydra today and the process of shedding. So, for those that are connected to the constellation of Hydra, this information will be very helpful. Hydra is a constellation associated to the later degrees of the astrological sign of Cancer in Vedic astrology, and it's particularly associated to the nakshatra Ashlesha. um, there's 27 different degrees. So you have the 12 houses or signs in Vedic astrology, and then you have 27 nakshatra, which are associated with within those signs, sort of like the degrees and the decans. So the nakshatra Ashlesha is associated to the deity of the Nagas, and the Nagas is the Hydra. And I'm assuming that it's associated to the Nagas because of where it's located, and it points to the head of the Hydra. And I have this particular position under my sun, my moon, and my Saturn. So this is a really interesting study. And if you do have any Hydra in your, in your galactic body, or uh, when you do Vedic astrology, and it's one of your Ganandas, then doing this work is really, really key, just to understand the process and the archetype. And Gananda is like the Sanskrit term can be divided into two words: Gand, meaning not, and Anta, meaning end. So the Ashlesha Gananda, or any Gananda in fact, is basically a karmic knot at the end. And so it's described as such, and the it's basically about ending a big karmic cycle. So people that have this nakshatra in particular will be coming to the end of something. So there's this energy of rebirth and renewal that is very present in their life. And if you notice, Hydras are constantly rebirthing themselves. So they're very aware of this process of death and rebirth within their lifetime. And so this knot in particular is tied at the end of the water sign Cancer and at the beginning of the fire sign Leo. And because it's the basically the final space right before the element changes from wire to fire, there's a lot of energy transferring between these two signs and at their meeting point. And so it's a pretty intense placement. And on my Western chart, the tropical chart versus the Vedic chart, which is the sidereal chart, it's depicted in my opposition of Mars and Neptune. So, the more you study all these different systems of gnosis, you'll notice that there are correlations, and they reconfirm themselves, but in different forms and shapes. Working with the Vedic astrology, I find there's a lot more depth. The Vedic mythologies really, really go deep, and they tie in so many elements because their way of seeing the world is so interconnected. And so it hasn't been so sliced up. And, from the Western, we often go into things more logically and from a linear perspective, whereas, in the East, it's more holistic. So doing your Vedic astrology will reconfirm a lot of things, but it will also give you more depth. So this placement creates the ideal circumstances for ascension. So it's, an extreme amount of celestial pressure that propels you to have like a jump in evolution. And, it's between these two elements that the extreme pressure is created, between water and fire. And water is just this intense emotional energy, which can be considered like our magic. It's kind of like the magnetism. Um, and the fire, on the other hand, is the dielectric. It's that which seeks to move and disperse all that water energy. Um, so here they come head to head, and the water can extinguish the fire very easily, and the fire can evaporate the water. So there's this constant internal pushing up between the fire element and the water element, pushing, and this is what creates the karmic knot. And there's many challenges. Like in Vedic astrology, they talk about it as being one of the most challenging positions. um, and they talk about this nakshatra as being there in order to unravel the knot, to allow the person to process a lot of karmic, um, like an accumulation of karmic energy from past lives, um, so as to finally take that jump. Like there's just like the coming to a head, like the pin, the pin needle. Everything is being pushed through the head of the needle, and then an evolutionary jump can take place. And so someone with this placement is often overwhelmed by their feelings and needs to be careful about the environments which they allow themselves to go into, because this placement, there's a lot of feeling. So it's basically like a hypersensitivity, and then the fire energy is all about movement. So it's like internally it's sensed as like wanting to move. The Hydra has 5 heads. The Hydra is very active and wants to move in many directions. And then the water energy kind of, hypersensitizes everything and then sort of like pulls you back in order for you to process. And then also having those, 5 heads, and sometimes it's depicted as more heads. But having all of those heads is just symbolic of reaching out and being able to, to distinguish a lot and to feel a lot, to feel a lot of different vibrations, and to also juxtapose a lot of information and to really go into depth. So, so it's a really, really interesting and pivotal placement. And, I see it as an opportunity. People who have this energy, there's an opportunity here. And it's kind of like the pinnacle of the energetic movement of your soul, having spiraled around and gone through all these different lessons. And it's kind of like, it's like the 12th house energy. There's sort of like there's the endings, there's accumulation of all the knowledge from all the previous signs, and then it's going to assimilate all of that information and then be able to rebirth into something new that is like a completely different dimension, so to speak. There are other knots. I just want to mention that there are other knots, nakshatras that have this kind of intense energy between the water and fire, and it's the zones between Pisces and Aries, Cancer and Leo, which is the Ashlesha, and Scorpio and Sagittarius. So you want to look into your chart and see, but the other ones, they have different names, and so there's different kind of energies involved. But they're all considered knots. So internally, I often feel this energy of wanting to bring together a lot of different points, like to bring everything into harmony within myself. And this can be, on my Western chart, this can be associated with my North Node in Libra. And I have North Node in Libra in the 12th house. And so I see it as this is again where you can juxtapose the Western and the Eastern way of studying the stars and understanding yourself, where they come together. And this Libra energy it's all about the convergence, right? It's moving between the summer and the fall. It's the fall equinox. And so there's a lot of abundance that was accumulated during the summertime. There was a lot of lessons learned, like the energy was just so potent. And then the harvest was done, and there's a reward to be had. And that's the wine of Libra season. And during this time, there's a reward, but there's also all the hard lessons that have to be assimilated, and hence making the wine. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work in harvesting and in then processing everything in order to be able to consume it and benefit from the nutrients. So moving from summer to fall, like the fall equinox, also represents that transition between 6 and 8 o'clock, where we're moving from day to night. And at night, it's a completely different energy. And that's where we are going over all of the lessons of the day again and assimilating, what needs to be done, what needs to be corrected in order to perfect and improve upon the hard work. And it's only in retrospect after projects that we can really gain a clear insight into how to perfect the processes and methods. So this energy is very present with Hydra, a lot about discerning, improvement, and just overall understanding. And that's where the convergence happens, is between the day and the night. It's, bringing those two energies together and coming into balance within the self in order to truly evolve into a new space. The pressure of this like the magnitude of pressure, is needed in order to turn coal into diamonds, right? So this is what this knot is all about, and it's it's all about the mastery of our own lives and the mastery of our spiritual evolution. My experience of this placement has been about fine-tuning, and has been about allowing myself to go through the process. One of the reason why I put this video together is the process of shedding is so important with Hydra. The Nagas were very devoted. Like the Nagas protected the temple, while the Buddhas meditated. And I consider this the simile, like, of the shedding process. So there is that element of devotion to the process that makes the process that much more manageable and beneficial. So snakes typically shed when they're young, between 3 to 8 weeks. Every 3 to 8 weeks, they're going to shed their skin and let go of the old, release old toxins, release all of the unhealthy behaviors that are no longer needed, and also assimilating and understanding. The body just assimilates into something new and something fresh. So as we grow older, eventually this happens less and less, and then usually around 4 times a year it will happen now. And this is also in tune with the seasons of nature. So not necessarily at the beginning. Some people might have it at the beginning of the equinoxes, but I have it at the end. And, this is because it's easier. You absorb all the lessons from the equinox and then you come to the end of that cycle and then you must shed. So some of the things that I noticed during that time is that the Neptune is blue. This is a lot about the 12th house energy. And like I will visually become green and blue during this time. There's a lot of physical, physical transformations that happen that can give you an indication that you're going through a shedding process. And so sleep becomes more important as well, because there's so much information being conveyed during dream time that's relevant to letting go, to assimilating, and to gaining greater clarity, and birthing forth this fresh new skin. So sleeping is really important. And the process itself of shedding can take anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, and depending on how well you manage it, just like snakes, your senses are often dulled. So I'll often find myself not seeing as well, not hearing as well, and any fragilities within my immune system will be exposed. And I think it's a way of providing insight to what's needed to be adjusted and improved upon to increase my health. So, so I also noticed during this period that, I just feel an extra need to seclude myself. And, you can observe this in snakes. They will kind of go off and, be in a corner. And it's about giving yourself the space, honoring that process, so that you can do the inner work. So it's partly about protecting yourself, but also about protecting others. And Hydra, if you look into the mythologies, there's a lot of negative things about, because they are associated to snakes, and especially the cobra. And the cobra is poisonous, right? The cobra can kill you. And I think that, this venomous aspect of the Hydra gained its reputation, and was emphasized in the mythological texts due to this process that we go through. And it's during this process that we're giving birth, and there's an intense shedding of our skin that, if we're provoked at the wrong time, we can potentially bite or poison that which we feel is threatening us. So it's not so much vicious, and I think that there's definitely an evolution that takes place. People who have this medicine have to understand the medicine of poison, because healers understand poisons intimately, and this is part of it. This is part of learning about poisons. And so the process taking place has less to do with external circumstances during the shedding. Like if we do bite back, it has more to do with this like internal mode of protection that we're moving through. And so, just being under great pressure and the need to expand into something bigger than our previous selves is a very metamorphic process, and and it requires attention. So in order to protect others and to protect ourselves, we usually seclude during this time. And this allows us to birth these new sensations and awareness. And, and birthing new sensations and awareness also comes with a certain sensitivity. And so we can be very instinctive in reacting to the energies around us. So, yeah, so This is a very big process, and I put together some information regarding self-care during this time. So knowing that, like sort of blocking off time for yourself to go through this process instead of trying to persist and push through and do activities that you know are going to be counteractive to the process, and that might put other people, you know, in a position of of just getting bitten. In order to protect others and yourself, you can create this space for yourself, this sacred space within your temple, not only your body but your home and your environment, to move through this process properly. So what I've done is I've created, like, water element is very much associated with the Nagas, and the way that they interpret it is like there's kind of like this, the water is, it's like it's the ocean, it's the deep ocean that gets stirred within you, and then it brings to the surface all this sediment laying at the bottom. And the sediment is considered to be like the past life energies, like any karmic energies, and so on and so forth. Whatever's in the subconscious mind. And then the fire kind of will start to burn everything off as the sediment gets brought to the surface. And so, hydras are more likely to have extreme kundalini experiences for this reason. So there's a lot more sediment at the bottom that needs to be reconciled, and that needs to be brought into balance within the person's life. So if you want to look into, I've had pretty crazy kundalini experience, you can go to my blog site at storytellingforourtimes.com and read about that there. So because water is so important and plays such, a key role, and we're moving from Cancer to Leo, and so there's that pressure of the water extinguishing the fire, and but water during shedding actually plays like a very comforting role. And so you can take baths and soak in warm baths and add elements to the bath that will reinforce the shedding process, such as, particular stones that have certain vibration or consciousness. You can look into that. I have my favorites: herbs, essential oils and spices, salt. I use saffron. The snake is associated with the first chakra, and so anything to do with vitality, with grounding, with authenticity, with rooting ourselves, understanding ourselves, learning, doing the ancestral healing. All of this is associated, and ensuring that you provide yourself with like an ample time for sleeping, like more time to sleep, will be really key during these times. Vigorous exercising can also help. So you'll notice that the snake will start rubbing its nose against a stick. If you have snakes, this can actually help because you can observe the snake itself and how it starts to shed. And so the vigorous exercising kind of, helps the snake to shed its skin by rubbing it off. But for us, it's more about flushing out of the system, moving, flushing out and moving the old fluids to the surface to be excreted and, just to detoxify yourself. And this allows the new fluids to enter into the tissues. So even things like massage, deep tissue massage can help. Different saunas, different processes for detoxifying can help with the shedding process. tools like writing, because there's sheddings happening on all layers on, you know, within the monad, it's happening on all the different layers. So the mental layer, tools like writing can be very helpful. You have the body, you have the mind, you have the emotions. Any cathartic work that you can do, speaking to yourself out loud in front of a mirror, it can also be wonderful to do cathartic work and to also release just debris that's in the mind and come to like a new space with yourself and a new relationship with yourself, because it's also about creating a new relationship with yourself entirely. And so during the shedding period, I notice that I'm more likely to fast. Like I'm not very hungry, and I usually get pretty cold. Like my body will get really cold, and so I stick to herbal elixirs and detox remedies. Like I just noticed naturally, I just don't feel like having coffee or like eating a lot. And it's like my body is just wants to go back to this, wants to, you know, go to this space of just releasing everything and then having the room to bring in new things, new habits, a new way of being, new way of seeing the world. So humans connected strongly to the Hydra constellation are here to evolve in great leaps and bounds. The themes revolve around embodiment of the spiritual aspects of oneself into the material plane. So this is how this Ashlesha is described. It's described as not trying to take apart the knot. It's more about allowing and surrendering to the process of what all of that debris and karmic energy is bringing to the surface, and kind of surrendering and then incorporating that, like reconciling it, and then moving from this more spiritual space, like more Neptunian energy, into like a more Taurus kind of energy into the material plane. So it's about bringing spiritual ideals into action, into motion, and into fruition on the material plane in the 3D. So it's very interesting because it's a huge jump when you think about it, to go from completely spiritual space where you're doing everything in the astral, and you're just spending so much time creating in the astral and working in the astral, to then bring that down into the physical plane and have it move through the elements in the physical plane. So anyone with Hydra needs to overcome the challenges that come with perceiving at great depths, and this is again bringing, you know, all that astral energy down into the material. And the energy is highly psychically attuned to nature. Like snakes are vibratory creatures, so they're feeling vibrations from miles away, and then you can imagine, you know, how things moved, light and sound and vibration, and then coming into the material. Like it's that process from vibration to material that we're really mastering. We seek to understand the poisons of humanity, and it's with this understanding, the reflection of that poison, and learning about how that poison exists within ourselves. So because we seek, you know, we're seeing, more prone to see the poisons in humanity due to the venom that is more prominent within ourselves. And this kind of allows, it's like as within us without, right? And so seeing, working on the poisons in humanity means really learning about the intricate nature of the poisons within the self. And turning that poison into medicine is what this is about, and the pain into healthy power without the need for controlling. So shedding requires a lot of surrender and discipline to accomplish as we move through these different stages 4 times a year. There's just so much that can be gained from this process when when you increase your awareness of it and your care. So due to Hydra's nature, we enjoy learning about extracting poison, and we make good psychologists, psychotherapists, homeopaths, accountants, medical and crime psychics, detox therapists, journalists, writers, poets, detectives, problem solvers, and mathematicians. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share, and I think I'm just going to mention that, it's really good to look at the placement where you have Ashlesha placed, where that nakshatra falls, like what planetary body it's falling under. Will really depend on how intense the shedding process is and which aspect of yourself you are shedding. So if you're someone who has it, in your Mars versus your Jupiter, that's going to make a big difference. I think having it in from the Vedic perspective, having it in your moon is the most potent placement to have it in, and where you'll feel it the most. So you want to take a look and find out, where that is in your placement. And Hydra is a beautiful, beautiful energy to have on this planet. It is, ultimately people constantly see things as opposites, of good and evil, the magnetic poles, and really once you start doing this spiritual work, even on just like mathematical, metaphysical level, like we understand that all is one, and with this gives more room to not be so afraid of its power, because when we say venom, Hydra has the reputation, and a lot of it has to do with dogma, but there's a lot of power in that. And so once this power can be harnessed, there's a lot of medicine that can be brought to the world. So this is part of why I'm bringing this forth. People who have Hydra can understand, who have the nakshatra, Ashlesha, can understand, how to nurture this process and how to nurture this energy within themselves to bring about the change within in a beautiful way, and then be able to share that with the world. So I have inspiringplayfulevolutions.com, which is also learningtospiral.com. It's all based upon this process of how we're spiraling through the universe, and we are, we're constantly learning and evolving and bringing forth our medicine. And every time we shed our skin, in this context, every time we shed our skin, we're able to bring forth a more concentrated and purposeful aspect of ourselves. And eventually we get to that place where we do take a jump and we do evolve, and can start living on a different plane. And it doesn't have to be so harsh once we can master this process. The first time I experienced my Kundalini awakening, when that energy, which is coiled up at the bottom of my spine, just like overwhelmed my system, I had no tools available. And I think a part of not having an overwhelming Kundalini experience has a lot to do with really getting involved in the process of shedding on a regular basis, and like honoring that cycle when it is happening, so that the energy bundled up isn't going to burst and explode. And so allowing these mini transformations to take place can prevent like a drastic transformation from taking place. So I'm wishing everyone a beautiful February. I think that this is very pertinent to where we're going right now with humanity. And I think that a lot of people are going to be shedding, whether Hydra or not. And some of them, you know, I really encourage you to look into your chart and see where this placement, where this nakshatra falls. And whether Hydra or not, I believe that everybody is going to be shedding a tremendous amount. We've already been doing it for the last 2 years, so it's just going to continue. So I'm sending everybody lots of empowerment, and wishing everybody lots of empowerment and energy to make it through this next season of change.